Hey, it's me, Maggie J. Today with a review of the Netflix show Midnight Mass. It's only 7 episodes long, and it involves a lot of cinematic shots and moments of quiet contemplation. So this might not take too long to dissect and review, but I won't know till I'm done with all the different steps. So let's just do this in the traditional way and see where we end up. This is my second video for spooky season here in the middle of November. I'm wearing my cheetah suit today with my devil ears because some children broke my cheetah ears a couple years ago and they've just not been replaced. I mourn them all the time. And I did try to curl my hair for this shoot, to look extra cute since I'm going to wear it down. But as you can see, 45 minutes, I guess, is just too long between curling and then being on camera. So these will be all the way flat by the end of this. Guaranteed. Now, this one will be a long one because it will be. I keep telling myself to make my videos shorter, people will like them more, but I already watched like 6 to 10 short compilation reviewers, and I am forever wanting more from them. Plus, I'm naturally a go too deep into the details kind of a person, and I cannot figure out how to shut that part of myself off. So instead of beat myself up every moment of making every single video, I'm just going to lean into it. If you don't want a very long, involved, detailed description of this show, you should probably check out now because that's where this is going, if you couldn't already tell by the length. Thank you for clicking, but not sorry. This is just how I make my videos. Anyway, so I think I'm ready now. Let's get to it. This show can be a bit tricky to explain if you're trying to avoid spoilers, but I can say this much. This is the kind of story that atheists love to watch because it's kind of an argument in their favor that religion has dark sides that may not be entirely worth what a person can receive in return. Fanaticism is never a sign of good things to come. I think everyone can agree on that. But in small, isolated communities where faith can be used as social currency, whether you want to live like that or not, it can pay to be more loyal than the others. But again, is that worth what you receive? Not just in your eyes, but in the eyes of those around you and God? This isn't just a story whether someone believes in God, though. It's more of an examination of unending faith and justification through religious experience. It definitely asks the question, is bad behavior justifiable if you believe God is leading you to it? There's actually a number of existential ponderings that take place throughout this short series, from fate to imagination to the finality of death. Several times I had to pause and think about the topic being discussed and decide how I feel about that. This series is pretty deep for one that didn't make me cry too much, so I do recommend it if you like thinking deep with a little bit of mystery mixed in with some gore and a little of this is what you wanted and this is what you get, and then some more deep thoughts. So, okay, that's what I can give you without the spoilers. So if that's what you came here for, thank you for watching, friend. Please like and subscribe and maybe come back again after you've watched so we can talk about it some more. But of course, if you're here just for the spoilers because you can't or don't want to watch, I've got all the in-depth details, so let's get to it. Now, I should inform you that I am not a religious sort of person. I have tried several times to ingratiate myself with those of the faithful sect, but it never quite stuck, and I never really felt like that's where I needed to be. So, full disclosure, I'm not a believer nor a participant of any religious organization. I'm just someone who respects the views of others while maintaining my own opinions. The first episode of this show is called Genesis, which even I know is the first book of the Old Testament. In the opening scene, we are looking at the results of a car crash, a convertible versus a Beetle, and the paramedics are performing CPR on someone who's been thrown through the windscreen of the Beetle. A man sits on the sidewalk watching this happen, asking if the woman on the ground is going to be okay. We assume this is the driver of the convertible, and a few moments later, the paramedics stop performing life-saving techniques because there's no life to be saved. The man on the sidewalk begins to pray, but another paramedic interrupts him to tell him to ask, in his prayer, why he always takes the kids while drunk fucks get to walk away. Which is actually a good question, if we're asking questions. This man, his name is Riley, he can't stop staring at the woman on the ground. Her face is covered in glass shards, and her dead eyes stare right into his. And the red and blue flashing lights bounce off of that glass and her eyes, creating this glittering, gritty image of the moment of this woman's death that serves to haunt Riley's quiet moments for years to come. It's almost beautiful in its presentation, but imagine having to see that image night after night as you attempt to go to sleep. It would be haunting, and Riley just has to get used to it. He pleads guilty to the charges he's facing and receives 4 to 10 years for this. He serves his time, receiving plenty of letters, photos, and even a Bible from his mother. He has not been forgotten while he's away, which is a blessing he doesn't even know how to appreciate. Many people find God while incarcerated. The time helps them to focus and sort out their motivations and purposes. However, Riley, former altar boy, as we find out, seems to have rejected religion completely and wants no forgiveness or pardon for his actions. 4 years Riley winds up serving, then he is released and goes home to Crockett Island, a tiny little place off the coast of Maine that boasts a population of a whopping 127 people. The number might be up to 129 if you count Riley himself and the pregnant woman residing on the island, but we'll get to her soon enough. Just know, you can only get to this island by ferry or private boat. And the ferries only run twice a day these days, so Riley has got to be on time, or he's going to be waiting for a while. Or so says his mother, who is trying to help him get home with as few problems as possible. His father looks like he could give no shits about Riley coming home, but she is doing her best to make all of the members of her family happy. This is a thankless job that so many women perform, and these men don't even know what this woman goes through to make sure that they're taken care of and not inconvenienced any more than they have to be. But I do, and I appreciate you, Annie. You are the champion of this family. Riley's younger brother Warren is going out with his friends, and his mother warns him to stay away from the uppers. Don't get into trouble. Be back by curfew. And for Jesus' sake, no drinking. She reminds him Riley is returning tomorrow, and he comes to a full stop to tell her that is good news. I feel like Warren is a good boy. Like, he doesn't want to do the worst things, but just enough fun things that might jeopardize his altar boy reputation, but only a little bit. Anyway, Warren takes off on his bike, and we're treated to a drive-by view of this island town with its unpaved streets and nicely weathered clapboard housing, sporadic businesses, scattered people engaging in various daily activities. There is a general homey atmosphere that comes along with the privilege of knowing every square inch of the place you call home. This really seems like an idyllic place to be, surrounded by shore and surf. If you've got a keen enough edge to your wares, you can easily make a living amongst your cohorts here. But you're also very secluded, and the chance for escape only happens twice a day. So don't forget about that when things start getting crazy here. Because yes, things will start to get crazy here. That's why they made a show about it. But that's not for another few episodes. For now, the boys are just trying to score some weed. And by boys, I mean Warren, his friend Uker, another altar boy, and the sheriff's son, Ali. Uker does not like Ali. He thinks he's a snitch because he's the sheriff's son. And I can't fully tell if him being Muslim is playing a role in the othering Uker puts him through, but several people on the island give off this same kind of attitude regarding the sheriff and his son, and I don't appreciate it. But I guess, sadly, it's kind of expected in these remote, less diverse areas. But is that because they're Muslim or because they're outsiders? Ali is eager to prove himself as more than just the sheriff's son, though, so given half an opportunity to do anything outside of what is expected of him, he dives in with both feet. The guy they're supposed to be buying the weed from, his name is Bowl, fitting, works on the ferry, and when he finally makes his exit from the boat, he meets up with these teen boys who he yells at for being too obvious with a money handoff. But then chooses to stand around and argue whether Ali is going to snitch to his father. Now who's being obvious, Mr. Bowl? Finally, they're done negotiating, but Uker still doesn't trust Ali. A short distance down the road, Warren locks up his brakes so he can say hi and bye to Lisa, one of his friends who correctly assumes they are up to no good. Uker waves their freshly scored bag of weed towards her, as if to show her that yes, they are a group of badasses, which ticks off Ali, who's been being accused of the one who's going to spill the beans since they picked up this stash. I'd be annoyed too, bro. In the next scene, someone is dragging a huge chest into a house we've not seen before, and then unlocks this heavy-duty, old-fashioned lock, but we don't get to see what's inside. Now the sun has set, and those boys on bikes get into a canoe and row out to another island. This is the Uppards, that place where Warren's mother told him not to go to. They make their way to where their little hangout spot is, and on the way we hear the heavy sounds of wings flying over. But it's dark, so who knows what that was. Ooker is sure it was something pretty big, though. This island is covered with cats, and they make their presence known the whole time the boys are there. Warren flashes his light around at some point and sees what looks like a human silhouette, but it's gone in an instant, and he can't be sure if he really saw anything. The next day dawns, and here comes Riley, riding home on the Bay Breeze. The ferry names are the Breeze and the Bell, by the way. I don't know if you need to know that. His mother is waiting for him, but Dad and Warren weren't able to make it. They walk toward home and pass a woman in a cloak and a beret. Cute outfit. Her name is Bev Keene, better known as Miss Keene. She's like number 2 over at the church and is looking to pick up Monsignor Pruitt, who is supposed to be on the ferry, but isn't. So she's very perplexed. Remember I mentioned a pregnant lady? Well, her name is Erin Green. She is 20 weeks along and is currently having an ultrasound. When finished with that, she and the doctor, Sarah, talk about the baby. It's perfect, blah, blah, blah. Through the window, Erin sees Riley and his mother walking by and looks surprised. Their appointment is then interrupted by an old, confused woman named Mildred, who is the mother of the doctor. It's obvious this woman has memory issues, and they're getting worse. Outside, Riley and Annie continue walking and say hi to the sheriff. His name is Hassan, and he's relatively new to the island. While they're walking, Annie is literally clinging to Riley, and he just looks uncomfortable. I'm sure he is not enjoying this mandatory walk through town, notifying everyone that he has returned. But there's really no other way for them to get home. There's not really any vehicles around here. The sheriff goes inside this general store and continues on into the sheriff's office in the back of the store. That is a first for me, a combination general store / sheriff stations. Gotta make do with the space on these little islands, I guess. Anyway, he goes into his office and slams the door to wake up a guy named Joe who is asleep inside the only cell. Joe has no clue how he got there. Sheriff tells him he was trying to break into the general store, so he brought him inside and put him to bed in the cell. Joe seems offended. He was locked up, but then the sheriff shows him that the door wasn't locked. None of this rings a bell, and Joe still looks surprised, so the sheriff continues giving him details. You said you were running from an albatross with wings as big as lawn chairs? Big wings, you say? Joe just pulls out a flask and gets back to his hydration routine until a dog starts making a racket out front. Joe rushes outside to quiet his dog, who is barking at Miss Keene. She claims the dog snapped at her and complains the dog is a menace before carrying on with her business. Joe apologizes to the sheriff for having to deal with him all the time, and then he and the dog set off as well, after calling the sheriff Sharif one last time. Again, either racism or Islamophobia. It's not uniquely identifiable since there's only 2 other minorities on this island, but they've been here for a long time. I suppose this attitude could also be as innocuous as some people not wanting to accept outsiders or newcomers to the island. But as we go through this series, we know several people have recently come to the island, and many residents do not participate in the local church, yet they're not confronted with hostility and rather innocuous circumstances, so it feels different for the sheriff and his son. You'll have to judge for yourself and let me know what it feels like to you. Anyway, Annie and Riley finally make it home, and Riley is feeling dejected since his father didn't make the time to see him home. His mother already told him Ed can't afford to take any days off from the boat. She further explains it's been 3 years since the spill that messed up so many things for the island community and their marine-based livelihoods. He'd be here if he could, she assures him. There is a storm coming. I'm assuming it's a hurricane, given the way they're predicting when it will make landfall. See, there are some similarities between Floridians and Mainers. Are people from Maine called Mainers? I'm going with that. There is a meeting going on of the town's higher-ups to discuss preparations. We learn a bit about how the town functions during this meeting, since it involves the sheriff, the marina employees, Miss Keene from the church, the mayor and his wife, and some other community leaders. Mostly, we learn that Miss Keene is a terrible control freak who looks pretty full of herself while she's explaining their ways to the newcomer sheriff. Over dinner at the Flynn household, they discuss some terms of Riley's parole, like him having to attend AA meetings, but Annie obviously wants them to change the subject. She asks Warren about school. He tells Riley Miss Green is his teacher, but a new Miss Green, since the old Miss Green died in the spring. Erin is back? Riley asks, and Mom explains she moved back a few months ago right into her mother's house and took up her job. Her pregnancy is mentioned by Warren as if it's something scandalous, but Annie is not trying to put any judgment onto Erin's situation. This woman is such a gem. Riley's got more questions, but his mother tells him, "You'll see her tomorrow at church, and you can talk to her then." But Riley wasn't planning on going to church. He says things are different for him now. Here's where Annie explains a little bit about the pastor, who has been a lifelong resident of this island for his whole 80-some years, and he's maybe having memory problems. She won't admit to it completely. The pastor recently went on a trip to the Holy Land and is due back in church tomorrow, so she is very excited. Warren says people had been seeing the Monsignor wandering around at night before he went on his trip, but the mom does not want him spreading rumors that might get their beloved pastor in trouble with the archdiocese. Even if he is scattered, he belongs here on the island with us, she says. Obviously, Annie is a big proponent for the small town way, in favor of the community sticking together and taking care of each other until the end. And that plays a big role in the decisions that she makes later on in the series. Warren and Riley discuss some altar boy stuff. Riley makes a joke about him only being an altar boy to get chicks. And the dad finally offers up his whole $2 worth of opinion. He has obviously not processed Riley's actions well. He can barely mention his accident without his voice shaking. So Riley being flippant about religion, while Ed and Annie are so devoted to God and to the members of this family, he won't stand for it. Riley will participate in church tomorrow and every Sunday, and that's the end of the discussion. We cut to Miss Keene making a visit to the Monsignor's residence. By the way, Monsignor is simply a respectful title used for some positions within the Catholic Church. I had to look it up. She knocks at first, but then lets herself in with a key, and we see this is the room that someone dragged that big chest into and unlocked it. The chest is still here with the lock on top of it. She starts talking out loud, saying she is glad to see that the father made it home, but is upset that he wasn't on the breeze that morning so she could meet him. Optics are everything to this bitch. She continues rambling until she notices someone has joined her. "Oh," she says, but we don't get to see who she's looking at. Meanwhile, on the island with all the cats, we see one of them is about to eat another one that has died, but before it can get to it, something in the bushes rushes out and attacks. Again, we don't get to see what it is. Riley's dad comes to his room after dinner to tell him his mother has been visiting the church every day to say a rosary for him, which further enhances why he's so adamant that Riley go to church, because he owes some devotion to his mother. The church is just a place that it's convenient for Riley to display that, because she loves it there and loves having her family there. Ed tells him not to participate in the communion, though. That would not be proper. They agree, and Ed steps forward like he's going to hug Riley, but Riley doesn't move, so he kind of bends down a little and shakes his son's hand. I had a little chuckle about this awkwardness. Now it is bedtime all over the island. At the sheriff's house, they say their prayers, and Ali kisses a photo of his mother. At Dr. Sarah's, Mildred is trying to go upstairs to her bedroom, and Sarah has to remind her that her bed is in the living room now, and holds her mother while she cries in confusion. Riley is watching out the window when he sees Warren sneaking out. The brothers wave to each other, then Warren heads off, and Riley finally lays down so he can stare at the wall and that woman that he killed until he falls asleep. The next morning, everyone readies for church. The altar boys, Warren and Uker, are preparing their altar boy stuff and are interrupted by someone who we don't get to see. We cut to the inside of the church. Miss Keene announces the song they'll be singing. The altar boys walk down the aisle and everyone is stunned to see the third person in line behind them. For several more seconds, we still don't get to see his face, but then the song ends and he is standing right in the right spot. And then finally we see it's just a guy in priest robes. I don't mean to sound disappointed. I don't know what I was expecting, but he's just a regular looking guy. Father Paul Hill is his name, and he will be filling in for Monsignor John Pruitt, who is ill and being kept in a hospital on the mainland. Paul mentions his condition was noticed by others during his trip. I assume that he means his memory issues. I don't want to say dementia or Alzheimer's for either of these sufferers because I don't want to mislabel what they're going through. And calling them crazy is just insensitive. So they carry on with the Mass, showing us in great detail the steps of the communion, like blessing the wafers and the wine and whatnot. I'm sure this is for the audience's benefit, so even those unfamiliar with the ritual can understand the words and the meanings. After Mass, Father Paul greets his congregation members, telling them Monsignor Pruitt told him all about them, and demonstrates this by asking all the right questions to the right people about relevant topics. He points out that Riley didn't partake in communion, and Riley admits that he's not in a state of grace at the moment. Father Paul assures him he's not much use to those who are. I really like this quality about priests and religious folk, always offering of themselves and softly encouraging others to let them do their job. When you're not looking for that, it can be annoying, but being someone who can be there for others all the time, it's a gift not everybody has. As Riley walks away, Ed mentions Father Paul used an older version of whatever blessing he gave during the sacrament. I didn't notice some of these details on my first watch through, but now that I know what happens, there's little clues like this scattered all throughout these scenes, letting you know that something is coming. Miss Erin Green waits to greet Riley once he's alone enough to talk to. He offers to walk her home and they catch up on what they've been doing since she ran away so many years ago and he moved off the island a few years later. I don't want to delve too deeply into what they say to each other. These characters grew up together and have a long history. And a lot of what they say is not really important to the main story. It's just interesting and thought-provoking. It's also a little weird in a way because it's not romantic. Not at this point. And it's not often that we get to see a man and a woman having this kind of intimacy on screen, with them sharing their feelings and perceptions and dreams even, without it leading to them having sex. Unique might be a better word for this, but whatever you call it, I like it a lot. We don't get enough platonic relationships on screen. There are some highlights of this conversation, though. Erin tells him, Littlefoot saved my life, referencing the baby she's carrying, but he doesn't push for details. I'm sure those will come out eventually. He tells her he's lost. He's got no purpose. He doesn't feel he should even be alive. At least in prison, there was a schedule he had to stick to. Now he's just existing at his parents' house. These two also do this thing where they say deep things to each other, but then the other doesn't really respond, which is nice. I don't know how to do that. And it does make me feel weird about the conversation, but obviously it's fine for them. They part ways so that they can prepare for the storm. As the storm makes landfall, we see Father Paul sitting in his living room. The chest behind him now open, and it's completely empty. Then the power goes out on the whole island. And once that happens, the storm only gets louder because there's no other noise going on. Mildred is freaking out, asking Sarah what's happening. Riley is watching out the window again, and he thinks he sees someone walking down the beach. And the next scene, the whole family is looking out the kitchen window, discussing whether someone is out there. And if there is it Monsignor Pruitt? Because if someone is out there, they are definitely wearing his hat and coat. Riley rushes out into the storm, but after running a ways down the beach, he doesn't see anyone, so he takes himself back home. The next morning, debris is strewn all over, and the power has yet to be restored. The Flynn family ventures out to assess the damage and check on Monsignor, but before they can make it beyond their own property line, Riley notices all these birds on the beach. The birds are not the main attraction, though. There are dead cats strewn the entire length of the shore. And that's the end of the episode. There was actually a lot that happened here, but it doesn't really feel rushed. Maybe because they don't go anywhere or have any kind of schedule, but the pacing felt really natural and there wasn't a lot of fluff in between the important moments. Some scenes, like everyone getting ready for bed the first night Riley was home, might feel extra, but those scenes help to flesh out these characters that we've just met and help us understand them in a way outside of their interactions with the main characters. It deepens the mystery around them or helps us to understand a bit more why they behave the way they do. I went into this show completely blind. I didn't even read the description. I just knew by the name. I wanted to see what this was about. So I pushed play, and by the end of the first episode, I still had no idea what this was supposed to be about. The cover art doesn't give me a lot, except tell me there's something weird about this guy's hand. Is it a drama about how religion can save anyone if they give it a chance? Is this new father a cult leader that will prove to be unstoppable because no one can get to the island to save the people from his influence? We only get hints at what the plot could be, which usually annoys me, but for whatever reason, I'm not annoyed. I'm eagerly waiting for the next episode so I can find out more about the people in this town. It feels like a lot of things are in flux right now, with the infusion of new residents in the forms of Sheriff Hassan, Ali, Erin and her baby-to-be, Riley and Father Paul. The altar boys are pushing limits of what they can comfortably get away with. A bunch of dead cats just washed up or were left on the beach. There's so many things that this story could be about, and we've only gotten a couple of clues so far. I'm not sure anyone could fully guess what's happening from this one episode, but if you did, let me know in the comments because I might want to talk to you about your detective skills. All right, Book 2, Psalms. We start off right where episode 1 left off, with all the cats scattered on the beach. Sheriff Hassan is trying to organize help to get them cleaned up. Mayor Wade seems to have his own agenda, trying to convince Hassan to come to church and participate more with this community. Now is not the time for this, Wade. Read the beach. By the way, I think this whole opening is all shot in just one take or with minimal takes, which really takes a lot of competent people, both actors and crew, to accomplish. And this show does it quite often. I love that technique. We switch over to the church where Lisa, Annie, and maybe 2 others are there for morning mass. Small attendance numbers makes it a bit awkward for singing, but Father Paul has a lovely singing voice, as does the organist, so it's nice to listen to. Riley takes a ferry ride to the mainland for an AA meeting. He's got to do 1 a week for his parole requirements. The camera kind of switches back and forth between the church and the meeting, showing that both of them have similar rituals. The prayers before and after, the communion wafer compared to the chip coin, how they sit together while listening to someone tell a story, the self-reflection that takes place while coming and going to those kind of meetings. They make the comparison kind of beautiful. While heading home from the church, Father Paul walks with Lisa, whose wheelchair goes incredibly slow for it being her only form of transportation. Somebody hasn't built her a turbo yet. Come on, guys. She asks where he was before, and he cleverly ducks the question without making it seem like he's avoiding answering. Then she stops her wheelchair completely and just stares at Joe the drunk until he and his dog turn around and walk the other way. She doesn't tell Father Paul why he stopped. She just smiles and says she's fine when he asks. At the school, Erin is in search of window cleaner and finds Miss Keene in the cleaning supply closet. Keene tells Erin to add some water to it. It'll make it last longer. But Erin says she already threw away the bottle. Keene tells her it's funny that Erin's mother used to put empty bottles back in the pantry because she didn't want to waste anything, and her daughter just tosses them out without a thought. Erin tells Keene something funny about her mother as well. How at home, she emptied every bottle she could. Good times. Apparently, Erin's mother was a drunk who abused and was mean to her daughter. Probably the reason why Erin ran away so early and didn't come back home again until after her mother was dead. Not sure if the people on this island were unaware of how much old Miss Green drank, or just chose to ignore it, or maybe forgot that she was an abusive mother since her daughter had been gone so long. It seems like Erin only has bad memories of her mom, though. Anyway, Miss Keene is fetching some kind of poison she plans on sprinkling around her house to prevent anything that might have washed up from the storm from getting inside. She's got a point, saying that they don't know what killed all those cats on the beach, but as much explanation as she's giving, it feels contrived. What are you up to, Bev? I don't trust this woman. Or maybe I just don't like her. Father Paul makes a house call to Dr. Sarah's to give private counsel or something to Mildred, her mother. This is such a sweet gesture. Another wonderful thing that I love about the duties performed by pastors, keeping people included in the circle of faith, even if they can't make it to the worship hall. I had a pastor come visit me when my daughter was in the hospital when she was little. I was not expecting any visitors, but it really made me feel like somebody cared about me and my daughter, someone outside our family. Like, way to make me feel like part of the group. Sarah invites him in and allows him to sit with her mother. Mildred takes one look at him and says, "John?" Sarah corrects her that this is Father Paul, not Monsignor Pruitt. He readies himself for a bedside service, and Sarah lets them be for a while. On his way back home, Riley walks by Erin's but doesn't say anything, even though she's sitting on the porch. "I didn't want to bother you," is his excuse, but she seems eager for something to bother her. They talk for a few minutes, general chit-chat. I can't tell if he is uncomfortable trying to be like a normal person with her, or if he is just naturally awkward and out of sorts. It seems worse when she's around, but all throughout this series, Riley never looks at ease or like he's confident in what he's doing or what's happening. I suppose that might be just the way the character is supposed to be played, but I wonder if it's the actor. Erin strikes me as a woman who is trying so hard to be all right, but there's so much anger and pain just beneath that beautiful smile, and it wouldn't take but one more straw to set her off, and she'll tell this whole town just how far up their own ass they can shove all their judgmental opinions. At home, Annie is doing some quilting and manages to prick her finger pretty good. She holds up her hand to examine the damage, but somehow can't see through her glasses. She takes them off, and there's her bloody finger, just as clear as can be. While the island sleeps, we are taken on an aerial tour through the eyes of what seems to be a pretty substantial-sized winged creature. It flies over Euchre and into what looks like an abandoned house, but we never see what it actually is. The next day is Ash Wednesday, and so many extra people show up to this service to get their blessings, causing Father Paul to ask why. Why not every holy day? Then gives an impassioned plea to keep returning to church, for God is forever giving and understanding, and people just have to keep showing up to prove their faith. They do the ashes ritual, and then they all head outside for a crock pot luck picnic event. And the last episode, Mayor Wade kept going on about welcome to the crock pot, but it wasn't until I seen this sign and then remembered that this place is called Crockett Island that it all came together for me and made me laugh at me for being so slow to pick up on the joke. P.S. This band's name is Timmy and the Whack Shack. I'm not even going to speculate if this is a local sex shop or what they call the barn behind Timmy's house where the band practices. You leave me a comment. Let me know which one you think it is. Dr. Sarah is at the picnic with a date who agrees that Sarah needs to get the heck out of here. But what would she do with her mother, who doesn't want to leave the island and might be severely impacted by a major move to an unfamiliar place? So it's settled that once she's gone, Sarah will be free, but until then, she has obligations here. Her date notices the pastor looking intently at Sarah, which she says has been happening all her life, especially when she was a kid, and it used to freak her out because he knows, her friend adds, and they both laugh because they're making a joke about them being gay, like the clergy can just see it in them. Eventually, Father Paul stops staring at Sarah and joins Riley on a bench, and they shoot the shit about various topics. Riley asks about Monsignor if he's up and about yet because Riley swears he saw him the other day on the beach. But Father Paul assures him that's impossible. Monsignor isn't going anywhere anytime soon. Riley kind of tries to hustle the father along, go spend time with other people, not the town pariah. But Father Paul is actually trying to spend even more time with Riley by starting up an AA chapter right there on the island so he doesn't have to leave for his meetings anymore. It would likely involve only Riley, but as much as they're featuring Joe the town drunk, I imagine they'll have him in there before much longer. Here is where we find out Joe is the reason why Lisa is wheelchair bound. Something about a drunken hunting accident? No wonder her parents glare at him like they wish he would just burst into flames. Father Paul thinks Riley attending on-island AA meetings would set a good example for others, and maybe encourage some others to participate. Perhaps not having a keg at the church party would be better encouragement, but what do I know? I drink way too much wine to talk about anybody else's drinking habits. Aaron interrupts, or maybe rescues Riley with the offer of coffee. They walk around the grassy field, talking about how funny it is that they have so many drink tickets between them, and neither can use them. The topic switches to her mother, how she used to collect all the drink tickets she could, and then going home after that was no picnic. She rattles off all the ways she is exactly like her mother, and you can tell she's worried the similarities don't end at having the same job or house or bed. Riley assures her she's nothing like her mother. She's going to be great at whatever she does, which is a really generic response. But I think Aaron needed to hear it from someone like Riley. Their heart-to-heart is interrupted by the emotional wails of Joe the drunk, whose best friend Nero is foaming at the mouth and then appears to be dead. He accuses someone of poisoning his dog, and everyone crowds around and just stares at this man crying while his dog dies. Finally, Sarah steps forward and tries to help with her human doctor skills, but there's no saving him. Nobody seems too concerned, though. Perhaps Joe is just that hated around here. Nobody even gives a shit about his dog. It feels really odd that no one even offers a word of comfort. Like, who's really the town pariah, Riley? Bev Keane definitely isn't concerned. I'm pretty sure she's the one who did this. She's the only person we've seen it with any kind of poison. It takes a lot of coldness in your heart to kill a dog like this, in front of the whole damn town on Ash Wednesday, no less. The next morning, Riley asks his dad if he can help out on the boat, and Ed seems surprised, but goes to find him a suitable pair of shoes for the job. At church, Miss Keene is talking shit about how attendance dwindles as soon as the high holy days are over. Did you ever think that they don't want to come here and listen to your condescension, Bev? We know you're the most devout dickhead on this island, but do you have to be such a twat about it as well? Fuck. On the boat, we finally get to see what Ed does all day, which is crab catching. Riley isn't as seasoned as these other two, but he tries to lighten the load. Ed moves to muscle a trap from one side of the boat to the other, and Riley steps up and says, "Dad, you're back," which I thought was weird. This is Ed's job. He's out here every day doing this shit. But then Dad says, "No, I'm good." And Riley notices he's not struggling or strained. Dude really looks good. Sheriff Hassan stops by the school to talk to Miss Keene about the mystery on the island. She thinks it's the cats, but he says, no, the dog that was poisoned. He asks about the stuff she spread around after the storm, some 1080 something. She again justifies its use, adding she'd be just devastated to find out if she had something to do with the death of a dog. He's got no evidence to accuse or charge her. He's just investigating. He asks, does anyone else have access to this supply closet? Only the whole island, she says. Even you just walked right in here. So according to Bev Keane, everyone on the island is a suspect. The sheriff goes to see Joe and sees that Bull, the drug dealer and guy who works on the ferry, is there and nearly makes a scene about wanting to search Bull's pockets, but he's really not here for that. So Bull takes off walking with his gas can. At first I wondered why Bull was on feet, like you don't have a pickup truck or something that you'd bebop around in, but then I forgot there's no vehicles on this island, so my bad. Hassan is actually here to let Joe know that he can't move forward on the Keene front because there's no evidence that she did anything. But this is just as Joe suspected it would be. He rambles on about some of his feelings towards Bev, that she's always been like this, and nothing she ever does is ever accidental. But because of her position, nobody will come out and call her a twat to her face. And the sheriff agrees with him. He does not like Bev very much, and I think he is suspicious of what she's up to in the big picture of the town. Joe mentions that she screwed half the island with some settlement that probably has something to do with the tanker spill, but we don't get any more details. Joe does appreciate that he's finally not alone in his dislike of Bev Keene. He only calls him Sharif one time during this visit. Father Paul is leading his first AA meeting, and it's just him and Riley. Even he mentions how awkward it is with just two people, but they do their best to go through the routine of praying and sharing. They wind up just talking, two strangers sharing what they know about this strange place. Riley brings up the settlements, explaining that Bev was encouraging everyone to take the settlements being offered after the spill, no matter what they were offering. Then also encouraging to take some of what God gave them and give to the church, which explains how this rec center got built so recently after an ecological disaster decimated this town. Riley wonders if it costs as much as people donated, since Monsignor Pruitt hasn't exactly been on an even keel. He sums it up by saying it's the same all over. Churches somehow becoming bigger and more luxurious while the town around them withers. Like a fat tick, he says, which is a pretty accurate description for some places of worship. Throughout the rest of their meeting, Paul and Riley go back and forth, not arguing, just talking. Father Paul, of course, wants to keep the topic focused on faith and belief, but Riley's not really down for that. And Riley gives a monologue that pretty accurately sums up why believing in God is not for everyone. The father, stunned, has to respond. Otherwise, Riley is justified in his non-believer status. But what he says amounts to, God still loves you, no matter what happens. And that's why you just gotta believe. I'm summarizing terribly here. This is a scene that actually does deserve a watch, if just to consider both sides of the argument for yourself. These reasonings from both sides are why it is difficult for those who believe and those who don't believe to find any kind of common ground. To be faithful, you must believe that there is some reason for everything that happens. And when everything is running smooth, yeah, it's easy to say God is good. Look at all that he has given. Yet there is so much not good stuff in the world that there is no explanation for. Either this amount of suffering is by design, or there's no one in control of the bus. One of those pills is easier to swallow than the other, and for some people, thinking we're all alone on this planet is easier than thinking our creator let a whole lot of good people suffer for reasons. We cut to Erin's house. She's alone, of course, putting some photos in albums. She hears a thud on the roof, and a few moments later, it sounds like someone walks down the roof and jumps to the ground. She gets up to look out the window. All the windows in this woman's house are fucking open. It's dark, and all the lights in her house are on, so it's difficult to see. But right here on the side, we see someone walk out of the frame. Someone wearing a long coat and a hat. I don't think she sees them, or if she does, she stays incredibly calm and doesn't run around closing all of the curtains in her house. Not even this window in the bathroom that gives everyone a really good view of what's going on inside. While she's sitting on the toilet with the curtains open, she notices a little blood in her underwear and immediately contacts Sarah. After an exam, Sarah assures her all is well. Erin listens to the heartbeat and is smiling when she leaves. Sarah's office is in her house. Did I mention that before? Sorry. Anyway, so Sarah's office is in her house. So she only has to lock the front door and then go back upstairs to get into bed. But her mother screams before she can make it to the top of the stairs. I swear I saw your father, Mildred says. It looked like his clothes. I'm starting to get a better picture here. Meanwhile, Bowl is still walking with his gas can past that same abandoned house from when something flew over the island. He thinks he hears something inside and calls out. A moment later, his own voice echoes back, like someone recorded it and then pressed play. Here's where I would have dropped my gas can and ran all the way home. But Bull has got bigger balls than me, and he gets a little closer and then goes all the way inside. What are you doing? A pair of glowing eyes awaits in the shadows, and before Bull can scream or run, we see his hat being knocked out the front door. And then the door swings closed. At church the next day, Father Paul gets everyone upset by insisting that Lisa stand to receive her communion wafer. Her parents are appalled. How dare he? To a girl in a wheelchair. But he keeps on, moving further and further away, consistently encouraging her to come on. Lisa looks confused, but she doesn't get angry. She gets hopeful. Finally, she tries to stand, and her legs work. They hold her up and carry her forward up the 3 stairs to get her communion wafer. And that is the end of the episode. Holy cow. Holy cow, what an ending. I write my reviews as I'm watching the show, and I usually save my wrap-up from thoughts for the end. But this show has the same creator as Bly House and Hill House, and they managed to shock and awe me so hard right at the end. I don't even remember what else I wanted to say about this episode. I have to watch the next episode right fucking now. I'll restrain myself, though. Hold on. Do you have any thoughts on what the big flying cat eater is yet? I don't want to say any more in case I spoil it, but if you're not getting really curious at this point, I think you got to pay more attention to the little details going on. Unless you're just here to have me explain it, then hold your horses. We're getting there. The pacing in this show is really good, so don't worry. It will all make sense in due time. Book 3, Proverbs. We start this episode with Father Paul giving confession. He has been lying to the congregation about Father John Pruitt. He was a very sick, confused man when he left and continued to worsen while away. Paul won't tell them everything that happened to Father Pruitt, not yet. This scene is part of a longer sequence that plays out throughout this episode, so this story is not finished. Suddenly, we are back in the church right after Lisa stood up, and everyone is celebrating the miracle they've just witnessed. Father Paul is not looking very well, though. He rushes out of the church and into the bathroom in his little cabin or whatever. Miss Keene sees this and follows, trying to offer help, but at least having the decency to not follow him into the bathroom. He coughs up some blood into the sink and looks pretty feverish. While waiting, Keene notices something on the wall, but we don't get to see it yet. At Dr. Sarah's, she is checking out Lisa and says everything seems fine. It's like she just healed. More tests could help figure out what happened, but it's pretty expensive to go down that road, and her parents are unable to pay any more than they already have trying to keep up with her medical bills, so they're just gonna enjoy their upturn in fate. Meanwhile, Mildred has finally gotten herself upstairs and is rambling about her daughter Sarah. To her daughter Sarah about her bad hip. Back at the church, parishioners are begging for more miracles, for Father Paul to heal their loved ones. Miss Keene tells them that's not how miracles work. Let's just pray about it. Father Paul looks out at the crowd from inside his house, still not looking very well. At an AA meeting that night, Father Paul tries to carry on the meeting like usual, but Riley wants to talk about the miracle he witnessed. Paul downplays Lisa's recovery, saying no one outside of Crockett would even care, and her parents aren't looking to exploit their daughter's recovery. But Riley wants to know how Father Paul knew that she was capable of walking. At all. Because of his non-believer status, Paul says there's not an answer that he can give that would satisfy. And I get that. You have to believe that miracles are possible in order to believe that a miracle happened. Later, the Flynns are having a quiet evening at home. Ed stands to put on a record and realizes his back isn't paining him as it usually does. He looks at his wife, reading without her glasses on and looking even younger than he's seen her in a while, and he invites her to dance with him. While this song plays, we see a montage of the Flynn family and how their lives are improving. Warren has a visitor at his window. It's Lisa, beckoning him to sneak out with her. Of course he goes, and they wind up on a canoe headed to the Uppards, and there they do some kissing. Riley leaves the house to visit Aaron. Their relationship may be evolving from platonic, but he's still focused on his sobriety and working the steps and such. This song also helps to pass time on the island. By the end of it, it's now 3 weeks into Lent. Uker and Warren are preparing their altar boy stuff and ask Father Paul if he knows where a certain something is. Paul says, "I'll take care of that," and sends the boys out of the room. Warren has to go back for a lighter, though, and when he opens the door, he sees Father Paul is pouring something out of a flask into a bottle. Paul tosses the lighter to Warren and heads out of the room through a different door. And then the sermon has started. Father Paul talks about miracles and mysteries for a bit, then looks a bit woozy. He tries to fight through the dizzy spell he claimed he was having, but soon faints and falls down the steps. We are back in the confessional, and Father Paul is continuing his story about Father Pruitt. He'd wandered off from his group on the road to Damascus and got lost in the desert. A storm came upon him, and he fought as best as he could against the wind and whipping sand until he found shelter in a cave. A sudden bright light brings us back to the present. Dr. Sarah is shining her penlight into Father Paul's eyes, checking his pupils. He's dehydrated, his heart rate is elevated, he needs to rest and drink more fluids. He thanks her for looking after him and everyone on the island. She's a wonderful caregiver, and he's so proud of her. Joe the drunk is relaxing in his camper when a knock on the door pisses him off. He grumbles as he gets up and opens the door, and then is completely stunned to see Lisa standing on the other side. He wasn't at the church to see her get out of her chair, so this is unbelievable. He backs away, fear carved into his face, and she comes in. She is there for a reckoning, and she tells him every single terrible thing that she wants him to suffer through. Then she says she forgives him because it's where healing starts. Oh, God, this girl. I loved this scene. It was so well done. It was powerful and emotional, and it showed Lisa living by the word that she believes in. And Joe is overwhelmed, and it showed. There's two ways that he can go from here, up or down. There is a meeting at the school. I'm not sure who called this meeting, but the topic is how much religion should be allowed at public schools. Apparently, Miss Keene has been reading Bible passages to her homeroom, and Ali has brought home a Bible, which has gotten Sheriff Hassan annoyed because he and I are pretty sure that if he were to pass out Qurans to the children of this island, he'd be run out of town. Bev is offended by this, of course. The meeting ends with both Bev and Hassan giving passionate pleas for why they should or should not include religion alongside school curriculum, but no resolution is agreed upon. At Dr. Sarah's, Mildred is again wandering the house, but she's not mumbling this time. She's talking in full sentences and asking very clear, direct questions. Like, it feels like I just woke up. Where have I been? And when did you move me into the living room? It's time for another AA meeting, and this time, Joe is here. He talks about what happened between him and Lisa. He sounds truly amazed by how he felt after, uncompelled to drink. And then he was curious if there was more redemption to be found by coming to the church. And then he learned there was an AA meeting that same night. Seems like it's all coming together and forcing or letting Joe get his shit together. Riley tells him showing up to the meeting, trying. That's what matters right now. And it matters a lot. At the end of the meeting, Father Paul rushes Riley and Joe out of there so he can collapse to the floor, coughing up blood again. As they're walking home, Joe talks a lot to Riley. He sounds hopeful for the future and regretful of his past, what he's done and has allowed to slip away from him. He asks Riley if it gets any better, the feelings. He says no, but maybe if they change themselves, it might feel different. I really like the way that Riley summed this up. It's very mature and wise. After their prayers, Ali asks if he can go to St. Andrew's on Sunday just to check it out. He's fascinated by the miracles coming out of there, but his father is adamant that he is Muslim. He can't go to a Christian church because that's not how Allah works. We know that Hassan converted for his wife. And he tells his son his mother kept her faith. She didn't go chasing miracles, and it's apparent that he's using his religion as a way to remain faithful to his wife. This is how he is coping with his loss, and he expects his son to do the same, to honor her. Not really the greatest reason to follow a religion, in my opinion. Hassan turns off the light and is startled by a pale face and glowing eyes pressed against the window. It's gone a moment later, but I saw it. Bev Keene, Wade, and Dolly are discussing a dinner Bev wants to host for Father Paul. Sturge, the mechanic from the ferry, and the organist is also there fixing the sink. Father Paul enters a few moments later. He is unsteady on his feet, crashes into a lamp, falls to the floor, starts coughing up red foamy blood, and seizes for a few minutes. And then he goes still, like he's dead. Again, we're in the confessional, listening to Paul tell us about Father Pruitt. Using matches to light his way, he stumbles through the cave until he sees a pair of glowing eyes in the distance. He lights another match, but can't find the eyes again. A third match lights, and the creature is right in front of him. Pale skin, no body hair, big-ass leathery wings, sharp teeth. It attacked Pruitt, draining him of all the fear and blood he had in his body. The creature eventually stood up, and the father called him an angel. The angel shared his blood with the father, a baptism of sorts, chanting over him as Pruitt eventually fell asleep. When he woke, he crawled out of the cave, refreshed, renewed, restored. He was young again. He began his journey back home, bringing the angel with him to the people who needed him most. And then Father Pruitt wakes up. While Bev and Dolly cry and Wade looks like he's going to give birth to a goat, the camera zooms in on the framed newspaper clipping. The man in the photo is Father Pruitt, looking just as Father Paul does now, even though this paper is from decades ago. And that is the end of the episode. Okay, so we're dealing with vampires here, right? I mean, it all checks out. Father Paul, or Father Pruitt rather, was fed upon and then fed blood from the angel. It restored him to his peak. He has been feeding the congregation his blood through the sacrament. Those who partake are healing in ways they didn't even ask for, but it seems to be coming at a cost to Father Pruitt, culminating right up to his death. And then he's resurrected by the angel. So it's not a traditional vampire story. I don't understand the length of time it took for Pruitt to come to this point. Usually it's pretty quick, or you have to kill a human, or you know the rules. There's a trigger. Perhaps sucking up other people's pain is the trigger, and once you fill up the tank, it's time. I don't think we get a full explanation about the lore behind this particular angel, so I'm a bit disappointed in that. I'm sure there's a book I could read, but that's for another time. Anyway, there were some powerful scenes in this episode addressing some serious issues like religion in schools and forgiveness and redemption. There are a lot of issues being discussed throughout these episodes, and I really like that no one is trying to have the right answer or even give too much of a response. The way that we feel about these topics, whether we agree or disagree or find fault in the idea, can expand upon it further to suit your feelings, or don't even want to think about that right now. These are all issues that we have to deal with at some time, and how we feel about these things now might be different than how we felt when we were younger, and we might feel differently when we're older. That's not a bad thing. It's the evolution of a person, so it's good to periodically think about these issues and reevaluate your stance. We are ramping up with the mysterious activities, or miracles, if you will. Lisa walking in the last episode, Father Paul dying and admitting he's actually Father Pruitt. He's brought a blood-sucking angel to the island. There's really a lot going on here, and we've got 4 more episodes, so let's hurry to the next one. Book 4, Lamentations. Aaron is at Dr. Sarah's checking on the baby, but there's a bit of a problem. Sarah can't find the heartbeat, and she can't see the baby on the monitor. There's just no baby inside of Aaron anymore. But she's not been bleeding. Aside from the spotting a couple of weeks ago, she's sure she's not miscarried. She was 5 months pregnant. She is simply no longer pregnant. What the fuck? Meanwhile, Mass has been canceled since Father Pruitt is still not feeling 100% after he died the night before. He's hiding in his room, avoiding the sun that burns his skin, and feeling hungrier than he's ever been in his life. Bev has brought him some soup and tries to compare his death to Jesus's, but the soup isn't what he wants, nor does he want Dr. Sarah to come by. He tells her he believes he's experiencing a spiritual awakening. He can feel Jesus moving inside him, which only makes her feel more righteous in her devotion to him. She is part of something important. Her pastor is going through something that Jesus himself went through, and she is going to stand by his side every step of the way. She suggests they tell the congregation he was restored by an angel of God, but if he does not want to, she, Dolly, Wade, and Sturge will keep his secret. She leaves him be, as he requested, and after she's gone, we see his hand has been damaged. He reaches it into a small stream of light coming through the window, and that light burns him again. Ed and Riley are out on the boat, picking up the daily catch. Warren didn't come today. Ed wanted to talk to Riley alone, and here is where the father and son will finally have their heart-to-heart. Ed spills his guts about how he's felt about Riley since he left the island, how he's resented him leaving and not telling his dad anything about his businesses and such, like he thinks he's too dumb to understand. And after the DUI crash, those feelings only got worse because only bad parenting could culminate into the mess that Riley made for himself and for the rest of them while he was away and since he's been home. Then Ed apologizes for having hardened feelings towards his son and treating him the way he has been. He tells Riley he loves him. It's just difficult for him to show that when Riley's around. As a parent, I understand these feelings from Ed thoroughly. And I know how difficult it is to admit to someone you feel you've let down that you did so. Because an apology doesn't fix what has happened, and it doesn't turn you into a better parent. It doesn't give you the right answer for next time. So there's no guarantee that you figured out how to better handle it. You're just more aware that you could be the reason for less than desirable outcomes, which is a start, but it requires more work to be done. Kudos to Ed for having the courage to tell his son how he truly feels about him and himself and his parenting skills. Riley doesn't respond to Ed after he tells him all this because he's processing, and I think that's the best response. Reacting immediately to an emotional dump isn't a good thing. It definitely takes time to figure out how to respond, if at all. So I like that Riley said nothing. His father just bared his whole heart to him. They're both going to need some time to adjust. Dr. Sarah is labeling a vial of blood from Erin back at her home office. Her mother interrupts her, looking even younger and more spry. She is definitely making a recovery from old age, I guess. But Sarah doesn't know what to make of it. They go over the test again, which is a series of questions that involves information about today, a person's childhood, their adult years or teenage years, and the rapidity with which the subjects change. You have to have a good grasp on your faculties in order to respond correctly. And Mildred does, and not for the first time. The only question that trips her up is, who is my father? It takes her a moment because I suspect George is not actually Sarah's father. But that is a story for another time. Mildred is going to make some tea now because she is able to again. She shuffles off behind Sarah and we can see something strange is happening to Erin's blood sample. It starts boiling when the sunlight hits it and eventually it cracks the tube and the blood inside kind of dries up. Vampires, right? Riley is visiting Erin, who is going through a weird form of nesting. She's not handled her mother's belongings since she moved in, but suddenly she's plowing through her stuff like she's got a deadline. She tells Riley some stories about her mother, highlighting how unkind and cruel she was. She told Erin many times that her birth ruined the mother's life. But things would be different for Erin's baby. Once she found out that she was pregnant, she left her abusive husband and returned to the island where she could protect her child and give them the loving environment she never had. This devotion to her child is extra heartbreaking, knowing that there is no child inside of her anymore. Riley cries while listening to her talk, but he doesn't respond to what she said. He tells her about a dream he keeps having, about being on the water before sunrise. He feels if he can get his boat to a new shore, he can start all over again. But once the sun comes up, he wakes up and is never able to realize the end of his dream, which he thinks means he'll never get off this island. It's a bit of a clunky conversation. They're both in their own compartments of grief. I'm not sure they're really listening to each other, but the words are pretty. On their own, each character's words would be all right, but placed back to back without much of a segue, maybe there was something that was cut out that might have helped smooth it out or something, or maybe these were just conversations that should have been had at different times. They pray together as the scene ends, and we transition to Father Pruitt, also saying the same prayer, but it seems to be bringing him physical pain. The rosary he's holding has cut his palm. He licks away the blood and realizes he wants more, then uses the cross to cut a deeper wound into his hand. It heals quickly before he can get his fill, and he realizes he needs more blood. A lot more. At the general store, Joe is standing in front of the beer cooler talking himself into not buying any beer. A greeting from the sheriff is enough of an annoyance. He storms away from the cooler. Finally, it is dark, and Father Pruitt is looking better and must be feeling better since he's headed to Sarah's house to give her mother her daily mass. He walks into Mildred's room. She's back in the room upstairs now. And again, Mildred calls him John because she recognizes his younger self. She wants to know what's happened, but he's dodgy on the details and insists she take the communion before anything else. Again, we're back in Erin's house. She thanks Riley for praying with her throughout the day, but assumes he must think she's foolish for believing in something that he doesn't. I understand Riley when he replies that he might not get it, but he respects it and kind of wishes he could be more into it. Me too. Then they talk about what each of them think happens when they die. Riley thinks there will be some sort of drug release that takes him on the trip of his life, as his consciousness fades into nothing and he is able to shed all that he was. It's a beautiful speech. Erin explains what she thinks happened to her daughter, how she was sent down for such a short time and then called back up into a light so bright. Their family surrounds her and she won't be alone, and there she'll wait for her mother to join her. And that's heaven. Over at Father Pruitt's house, he is battling with his hunger pangs, trying to pray them away. He winds up on his front porch yelling, "Why won't you come?" I think he's waiting for the angel. Joe decides to stop by just then. He's been struggling with his urges and is wondering if the father has some time to counsel him, but he doesn't look like he's in the best of shape. Father Pruitt insists he come in. Joe moves to sit at the table and notices the newspaper hanging on the wall. "You could be his son," he says, about the resemblance between Father Paul and Father Pruitt. Father Paul cannot stand up straight and kind of knocks into some things, making Joe think that he is drunk. So Joe tries to leave, saying he'll come back for the meeting tomorrow and they can all talk then. Pruitt moves closer to him, praising Joe for being able to overcome his addiction for today. He pulls Joe into a hug and holds him close for way too long. Joe struggles against him, eventually freeing himself from the father's arms, but he falls back and cracks his head on the corner of a table. Father Pruitt kneels beside him, lapping up the blood pouring out of Joe's head wound. The next morning, Erin and Riley wake up in her bed. It appears they are evolving into something more than just friends. He asks if she wants him to walk her to church, but she says she might take a trip to the mainland instead to get a second opinion about her pregnancy. She invites him to come back tonight, and it sounds like a pretty significant invitation. He agrees to return. She goes to the mainland and sees a doctor who tells her she is not someone who recently lost a child. Her tests show she was never with child, which leaves her even more confused than before. Ali is ready to go to church, and his father is still not happy about it, but he doesn't stop him. At the church, everyone is waiting for the father to start the mass, but he's very late. Bev lets herself into his cabin and finds Joe's body. Her first reaction is to help the father, to clean him up and to cover for him and to get him back to the normal routine. He shows her he can't go into the sun though, so she fetches Wade and Sturge to do something with this body. They are hesitant to help. A member of their community is dead, presumably at the father's hands, but Bev shames them into helping their priest, whatever the task. And at the end of it, they do help get rid of the body while the congregation sings some hymns in the building beside them. Father Pruitt does seem rattled by his own actions, but Bev is definitely weaving a comforting tapestry of scripture and forgiveness and empowerment. She doesn't want him to feel bad about what he's doing. That night, Father Pruitt emerges from his cabin in time to catch Riley, who has showed up for AA. He invites Riley into the rec center, and they have their meeting alone. Pruitt doesn't even seem to be trying to not be a priest throughout this meeting, making excuses for God and claiming that having faith is the most important thing that any of us can do. Riley asks if Joe will be coming, but Father Pruitt says Joe is off island visiting his sister. He'll be back soon enough. But here's where he just fucked up. Joe told Riley after the last meeting that his sister died recently, so either Joe lied to Father Pruitt about where he was going, or Pruitt is lying to Riley about where Joe is. If it's the second, why would Pruitt need to lie about Joe's whereabouts? Feigning ignorance would have been less suspicious, but now Riley is looking a lot more agitated. At home, Annie can't stop going on about how great Father Paul is for the island. She's not suspicious of him missing Mass. She knows he's been putting in so many extra hours, making house calls to Mildred and dealing with more people sitting in the pews. And she can feel that things are different for them now. She brings up her not needing glasses, her husband being in better health than he's been in years, Mildred's seemingly miraculous recovery. She can feel something is happening here, and she wishes her son would let these miracles change his heart about God. He tells her Father Paul lied to him tonight and asks her to be careful. Neither of them know the significance of this exchange, and he heads to Erin's for the night. Finally, the angel shows up to the rec center, much to Father Pruitt's relief. He fills up the sacrament bottle with his own blood, very neatly, I should add. He doesn't even spill a drop. Riley gets to Erin's house, but he's got a nagging feeling about why the father lied to him, so he heads over to the rec center to find Father Paul on his knees, still praying while the creature finishes corking the bottle of blood. Before he can say anything, the creature tackles Riley and begins to feed off of him. Father Pruitt shuts the door to the rec center so no one will disturb them. And that's the end of the episode. Okay, so I'm still unsure how these vampires work exactly. It took Father Pruitt weeks, if not more than a month, to become how he is. And everyone who has taken of the sacrament has experienced noticeable improvements taking place. So is it just a matter of time until they become like him? Unable to stand the sun and craving copious amounts of blood? How long does that take? You know, as I'm sitting here and I'm talking all the words together at once, I'm kind of putting it together. Father Pruitt must have been using his own blood to fill up the sacrament bottle while the angel was away, which is why he passed out in the church. And then he just never recovered, needing more blood, but the angel was not there to recover him, so eventually it took him down, I guess. And for whatever reason, when he died, now he's actually a whole vampire. So the people who are in the congregation, they're just getting the benefits of drinking vampire blood currently. I may have just solved my own biggest mystery here. Let's carry on. Speaking of blood, what happened to Aaron's baby? Did she just absorb it? Suddenly, those petty issues from the first few episodes don't seem so serious when unborn babies are disappearing and people are being divinely healed and burned by the sun, and a big angel is preying on anything or anyone that happens to be all by themselves in the dark. Problem is, not enough people know about these serious things going on, so they don't even know they should be prepared. But then again, how do you prepare for vampires? Book 5, Gospel. The next morning, the Flynns are missing their son because he stayed overnight at Aaron's. But then we see that Aaron is missing him too because he never showed up. He's not the only one missing, though. Bull's mother is in Sheriff Hassan's office asking him to take his disappearance seriously because nobody else is. Over at Dr. Sarah's, Mildred is looking about 40 years younger, and Sarah still cannot explain or understand what is happening to her. A group of people have gathered in front of the church, but Sturge updates the sign, and it says Mass will be taking place on Good Friday at 8 p.m., along with a midnight Mass for Easter, Saturday night at midnight. Lisa double checks there won't be any morning Mass at all, due to Father Paul needing a few more mornings to get over his head cold. Everyone's attention is quickly stolen by the appearance of Mildred, looking young and spry. Dolly is most surprised of all. Aaron goes to the Flynns to ask for Riley, but Annie says she thought he was with Aaron already. She later checks on the family's boat, but none of the Flynns have seen him since he left for her house. This really upsets Ed. He thinks Riley's done a bad decision again and is well on his way to destruction. The sheriff is also looking for Joe, but he's likely 5 miles out to sea where Bev told Sturge and Wade to put him. While calling in the missing persons report to the mainland, Aaron shows up to tell him about Riley. She's checked his house, the boat, been calling all day, but no one has seen him since last night. The sheriff asks the usual questions, gives the usual assurances, but Aaron is insistent. He was supposed to come over, and he didn't. She tells him Riley and her talked about death, which is kind of why she's there, to make sure that something unforgivable hasn't happened. The sheriff absorbs her concerns and adds Riley to the list of people he is searching for. The Mass at night is a beautiful occurrence, and it doesn't seem to have stunted attendance. However, Riley doesn't show up, and you know that was part of the deal with his dad, so this is going to be an issue. Mildred and Sarah show up again. Bev welcomes them with her typical creepy, cryptic, scripture-riddled way, and then the Mass gets underway. What starts off as a normal sermon focusing on what Good Friday means, or should mean, quickly turns into a lecture about giving all the devotion and loyalty we have to God, not putting anything above that, because we are fighting a war, and without complete and total devotion, it is already lost. The reaction of the crowd is mostly pleasant, but Mildred is highly offended by this speech. She rushes out of the church and tells Sarah, "That is not my church, that is not the man I knew," and tells her not to go back there again. Later, Erin is asleep on her couch and is awoken by a knock on the door. It's Riley, and she is pissed. She's likely got some abandonment issues, amplifying her reaction here, but Riley remains calm and simply asks if she will take a boat ride with him, like they did when they were teenagers, and her hard feelings melt away. Then they're rowing out into the moonlit sea. Once they get all the way out to nowhere, Erin says she's trying to give him space and time to reveal what he's going through, but she's not as good at that as he is. So she's got to ask what they're doing out here. He tells her he's going to tell her a story that she won't believe. She's just got to listen to the whole thing. Then we see what happened after Riley was attacked by the angel last night. Father Pruitt is holding him, comforting him as he rearranges Riley's neck bones so they're no longer broken. He lies on the floor of the rec center for a bit longer before he wakes up and can move. Father Pruitt is waiting for him, like Riley's just a few minutes late to AA. He tries to run away, but it's daytime. As soon as he steps outside, his skin starts to crackle and burn like bacon in a broiler. Father Pruitt pulls him back inside and carries on like they're having an AA meeting. Today, Father Pruitt will be the one speaking the most. He shares stories of his lifetime, about his sister who died from polio, about an altar boy who brought him a mouse caught in a trap that he basically tricked into thinking God had healed because Pruitt had simply replaced the mouse. The altar boy was convinced, though, enough to keep up his faith for another decade after that, so the deception must have been worth it, right? Riley happens to be that altar boy and asks how Father Paul knows that story. I totally forgot Father Paul, being Father Pruitt, is not known to everyone, so my bad. I thought Riley already figured this out. Riley is slowly putting the pieces together, but Father Pruitt knows all, and he's got a question of his own. Why did you come here last night? You've never showed up at night before, and then at that time, why? Meaning while the angel was there. And Riley tells him, Joe Colley's sister, indicating the father lied about where Joe went. Pruitt asks for forgiveness and understand that's why Riley came back to church, so it's kind of Pruitt's fault that Riley was there. He starts to justify himself, saying the Lord worked through him to kill Joe Colley. And this is where Riley has reached his peak. He demands to know what happened to him, to Joe, what that thing was that attacked him. But then Bev walks in, stepping over Riley's blood like some toys left on the floor by some Sunday school kids, acting like nothing is out of the order in the least. Father Pruitt suggests she come closer and stand right here. He will hold Riley back if necessary. Then he roughly shoves Riley into one of the folding chairs and holds him in place while Bev slowly moves closer and closer so Riley can smell and hear and even see the blood pumping through her veins. And without warning, he lunges toward her. But Father keeps him in his place and starts the serenity prayer. Done with her part, Bev leaves to wait for the sign to start the next phase. Father Pruitt sits with Riley while he writhes on the floor, fighting through fits of either pain or hunger or both. Pruitt tells Riley that is the Holy Spirit guiding him to what the right thing is to do. He's been through all this as well. He died and was resurrected. Then he explains that when he was suffering, the Holy Spirit moved through him. Joe was taken and he was sustained, which is just a fancy explanation for murder, as Riley is quick to point out. Pruitt says he doesn't feel guilty, though. He's found grace where he knows guilt should have been, and somehow he thinks that this has elevated him, lifted him up to a higher plane where he is not human, but nearly divine. Kind of like he believes that he will transition into being an angel or a god if he just allows the Spirit to move him as it must. Which is just, wow. Can devotion go too far? Yes, I'd say. Yes, the hell it can. Once Father is finished talking about himself, he turns his attention to Riley, saying he is not the only person in this room who has killed someone, as if attacking Joe and causing most of his blood to gush out of a wound in his head is the same as being too drunk to drive and crashing into an unsuspecting stranger. I mean, okay, they're both murder, but holy fuck, are they not the same? Both are horrendous acts, but one is definitely a conscious act, and the other is a result of poor decision-making that could have been avoided. If you're listening to a higher power, can you possibly avoid doing what they say? Especially if you think those voices are leading you to an even more enlightened way of life? To a path closer to God? A drunk might not be in control of their faculties, which doesn't absolve them of any kind of guilt or crimes committed, but someone following their faith to the extent that they take the life of another and feel no guilt, well, one of these is definitely much more evil in my book, and I think Riley agrees with me. Pruitt explains that Riley feels guilt for his actions while Pruitt does not, which must somehow make sense in a spiritual way that puts Pruitt in a closer degree to enlightenment. You can tell when he gets angry and yells at Riley, who is still passionately disagreeing with any kind of rationalization or equalization between their individual instances of murder, that this fact must be true because it is the only thing that separates Pruitt from being a tool used for religious good and a straight-up murderer and blood drinker. So he will die on this hill as many times as it takes until someone or many someones agree that he is on a path of spiritual enlightenment that might require him to take some lives, but will all be worth it in the end. Right? It's gotta be. It's the only thing sustaining this holy man. He demands to know how Riley feels knowing that he doesn't feel guilt for the murder that he committed. Jealous, Riley admits. And that is a very honest answer. Pruitt thinks he's got the upper hand now since Riley has conceded that he is jealous of Pruitt's clean conscience. So Father throws open the curtains to signal to Bev that the next phase can begin. Then Pruitt tosses out this little nugget of info that people throughout time have habitually been afraid of angels because they arrive with bad news and conditions only worsen from there. Perhaps we should be afraid of that angel he lured back to the island then? Probably too late for that now. Bev and Sturge enter a few moments later. She launches into some speech about Riley being chosen by God to receive this blessing. She's obviously annoyed that someone like him was chosen before someone like her, and reminds Riley in the most condescending tone to not mock what God has granted him. Sturge rolls up his sleeve and offers his own blood. We see he's given his blood several times already, and I'm wondering why Sturge is participating so wholeheartedly in these plans that don't seem to be benefiting him too much. Bev? She's a zealot, just eager for attention and power. What does Sturge want out of or expect out of this? I can't even imagine. He just cuts himself and bleeds into the communion cup. I'm sure this kind of shit would make unbitten Riley want to fight someone, but he is not the same as he was. He resists at first, but he's incapable of resisting for long. He snatches the cup from Bev and empties it quickly. Later, he admits it does make him feel better. Father Pruitt gives him a further tainted explanation for why he shouldn't feel guilty or wrong for doing as their higher power commands, for allowing them to work through him. Pruitt's got another one on the hook of believing they are righteously justified. So far, on the same hook are Bev, Sturge, Wade, Dolly, maybe even Lisa, but not in the same way, and now Riley. Only Riley has been attacked by the angel, though. But Father Pruitt lets him go anyway, so he can explore the island with his new eyes that seem to give all the lights he looks at a pretty glowing, pulsating effect. It's especially beautiful looking at the stars. Everyone else in on the plot wants to keep him locked up, but Pruitt seems like he wants to make a point here by giving Riley his freedom, along with the knowledge. I suspect Pruitt thinks Riley will soon return and be ready to accept his new life with open arms. Before releasing him upon an unsuspecting island of humans, Father Pruitt tells Riley he will be overcome with hunger again, and that he will have to do things to satisfy those urges. But those are just things he cannot change, part of the blessing. Then he tells him God will tell him who to share his flesh and blood with. So I guess Riley is supposed to go out and make more like him? I thought the Father was feeding everyone the angel blood through communion, so I don't know why Riley needs to turn anyone. The truly devoted will be turned anyway, right? As Riley wanders away, Beverly voices her concern that he might tell someone what he knows. Father Pruitt calls him an apostle and says what else are they to do but spread the word. We get a quick run through of what happens to Riley over this night. Riley heads through town with his eyes shining in that vampire way and winds up on the shore staring into the darkness. When church lets out, he's standing in the shadows and he sees Mildred tell Sarah that this isn't her church. Later, he's at home and watching his parents sleep, seeing the blood pump through their veins. Now we're back in the boat. Did you forget we were in the boat? I did a little bit. This has all been a story that Riley's been telling to Erin. And Erin is not believing this story hardly at all. She's still kind of wondering why they're out there on the boat. When they did it as teens, this is where she told him that she was going to run away. So what could he possibly be trying to tell her that she won't be able to escape from because they're on a boat? She assures him no matter what it is, it doesn't have to be this extreme. Just tell her. They will weather this together. He says this isn't so she can't escape. It's so he can't. So he can tell her the whole truth. So she has a fighting chance to escape what is about to happen. Because she wouldn't believe what he told her without also being able to witness it herself. He tells her he loves her, that he has his whole life, and that he did his best. And then the sun comes up. Everything is silent for a minute. And he's in the boat, not with Erin, but with the girl that he killed in the DUI. She's not covered in glass or staring at him with dead eyes. Soft music plays as they grab each other's hands and stand up like their adventure is just beginning. That warm glow is just the burning body of Riley, who is being incinerated by the sun because he's a vampire. And Erin screams and screams like a woman who has no fucking clue what just happened, what is happening, what she should do, or how the fuck she even got to this point. She was a woman expecting a baby just a couple of days ago. And that is the end of the episode. Holy shit. Talk about a barn burner. I understand why Riley did this. He was right that he'd have to show Erin before she would believe something this crazy was happening right in her own church. But this poor woman who just had her baby disappear like it never even existed had to watch her best friend for her whole life, a guy she was currently falling in love with, tell her the craziest story and then ask her to believe him. And then the sun set him on fire because he's a fucking vampire. Oh, my Christmas cookie. I'm trying so hard not to say, oh my God, because that is a weird presence to invoke while watching a series like this that seemingly wants us to believe an angel of the Lord is allowing or wanting this to happen. I don't think this is an angel at all, just a misinterpretation by people who are so devout that they can't help but see everything that happens to them as a divine occurrence. But let's get on to the next episode before we delve too deeply into those kinds of musings. Fuck. I'm gonna need a water break. Book 6, Acts of the Apostles. Eventually, Erin is able to compose herself enough to brush Riley's ashes out of the way so she can row the boat back to shore. Back on the island, Father Pruitt heads for the safety of his cabin before the sun fully rises. Ed Flynn finds some notes left by Riley before he went to Erin's. Speaking of, she's made it to the shore before too much of the day has passed, and she is physically and emotionally drained. She passes the church. Sturge is updating the sign about midnight mass on Easter. She knocks on Sarah's door and asks for help. The next thing she says is, "And now you think I'm crazy," because she's told that whole story to Sarah, a doctor, and even to herself. It sounds like she's got some issues. Sarah agrees it sounds crazy, but that's not the only crazy thing that's been happening around here. Sarah has a woman living in her home that's supposed to be her mother, but has been aging backwards, repairing her dementia, turning her hair from white to brown, taking away her wrinkles and frailty, whose blood also happens to boil in the sunlight. So when she hears that Riley combusted in the sunlight, it's not that crazy at all to her. At Father Pruitt's, Bev rushes in to close the blinds so no one gets caught in the sunlight. But Pruitt tells her Riley is gone. He sacrificed himself. He could feel it when it happened. Again, she tries to be comforting, but basically comes around to telling the father that they're better off without him because he wasn't as devout as some others are. Now they can focus on those who deserve blessings the most. Meanwhile, Sarah, Erin, and Mildred share their information together to try and figure out what is happening here. Sarah tells them Mildred's blood boils in the sun, as Erin's did after her miscarriage, but there is untainted blood left behind. She wonders if Riley's blood would have boiled away completely because the concentration of stuff that combusts is somehow higher in him, and that's why his whole body reacted as it did to the sunlight. Mildred asks if there's a way they could maybe get rid of the stuff and keep the rest of their blood if they're not as far gone as Riley. Sarah admits she's got no clue, but a number of poisons can be filtered back out of the body if not too much has been ingested. So yeah, maybe, but ultimately, who knows? Ed comes by to see the father, but his apostles surround him, making it uncomfortable for Ed to talk about what he came to talk about. Pruitt dismisses the crowd so Ed can ask about the letters the father had asked Riley to write. Ed doesn't think his son is well based on what he's written in the letters, and now he's missing and can't go to the authorities for help in case it sends Riley back to prison. He just needs help. Pruitt admits that he knows Riley isn't well, but suggests Ed should assume the best, that he's up to a lot of good somewhere. He asks to see the letters that Riley wrote in case they spark an idea as to where they could be, and Ed says, of course, one is for you, actually, and hands them right over. Inside the envelope for Monsignor, a short note says, "Remember, we are dust, and to dust we shall return." That's the phrase used on Ash Wednesday before someone gets their ash marks on their forehead. Erin stops by the Flynns again, asking if they will leave the island with her that evening. But Annie doesn't want to miss Mass that's taking place that night at midnight. She asks if Erin would tell Riley to come home, as if she's letting him hole up at her house or something. And Erin has to tell her that Riley is dead. Annie does not take this information well and shoves Erin off of her porch. Meanwhile, at the sheriff's office, Sarah is telling him she suspects a contagion is circulating from the church and is going to take some samples to the mainland that night, then coming back to the island with reinforcements once they figure out what the contagion is. She wants Sheriff Hassan to look into St. Patrick's on a suspicion that she has. He knows that will not go over well, and he doesn't want to kick that hornet's nest. He's faced enough strife throughout his career as a public servant, being a brown man and later a Muslim man living in a post-9/11 world. It's what drove him and his son out here to this sparsely populated island, so they could escape the corruption and internal politics of serving big city sectors. Now life is better, he thinks. It's not as dangerous for him or his son, and he doesn't want to jeopardize that by digging into something that may or may not be happening at the church. He is not going to intentionally invite the wrath of people like Miss Keene into his life. Sarah isn't happy, but understands his position. I wouldn't be eager to get all up in the church's business just yet either, especially since she can't even tell him what she suspects is happening or what he should be looking out for. Anyway, Aaron, Sarah, and Mildred show up for the ferry, but it is nowhere to be seen, which is odd because the ferry is about the most reliable thing in this town, so there must be an issue. Sturge tells them the ship was sent for repairs. Both of them, actually, and there's no boat that evening. It might be back in the morning, though, so no worries, really. Sarah asks if there's any other boats available, but he offers them nothing, and the women walk away from the docks confused and disappointed. At 7:50 p.m., the power goes out. Hassan calls Sturge to find out if there's a problem. Sturge blames the rain that's falling, but we can see he's turning off the power to the island himself, and Mayor Wade is right there next to him. Wade suggests they continue making sure the boats can't be found and wait until later and to cut the power to the cell tower. Mildred, Aaron, and Sarah are back at Sarah's house, and Mildred is looking another 10 years younger. I have been wanting to say this since the beginning, that whoever aged up these characters, Mildred and Father Pruitt, it looked fucking horrible. They should have gotten different, older actors and maybe only aged Millie up by a little bit, because this actress has been this young this entire friggin' time. Instead of taking this obviously young woman and trying to make her look 100 years old. Bad job. You gave away your hand too early, and I only waited this long to complain so I wouldn't spoil the story out of sequence. Anyway, Erin says she is going to Mass tonight because she needs more answers, and everyone she and Riley know and love will be there, so she's going to be there with them. Ali asks his father if he would come to church with him tonight. There's supposed to be some kind of miracle that will be revealed, and he'd like his dad to be there with him. Sheriff Hassan reluctantly agrees, the idea of a big revelation likely fueling his agreement. A candlelight procession begins heading towards the church, singing hymns and gathering participants along the way. Erin goes out to join them, and Sarah and Mildred go along as well. So the whole town is really going to be there. As this procession passes by the cell tower, Sturge cuts the lines inside the power box and checks his phone. Signal is down, and no one even notices. Very clever, y'all. Now the entire island is completely cut off from the mainland, and Mass is about to begin. It's gonna be spectacular. I can feel it. They all file into the church with their candles still lit, and Father Pruitt begins midnight mass to celebrate Easter. And it doesn't take long to get to the revealing of the miracle. He confesses he's been lying to them. Monsignor is not recovering from an illness on the mainland. He has recovered and been restored and returned to the prime of his life, for he is Father John Pruitt. He tells them of the angel of the Lord who restored him to perfect health, and that they've also been being restored to their perfect health. He knows they've noticed these blessings, so they should continue to put their faith in him, in God, in this angel who he has brought home with him from the Holy Land. It will not be an easy task to accept their new perfect form, so he is going to demonstrate the process, so they won't be afraid. Sturge steps forward to show the process that I don't think even he understands all the way. But he's all in. He drinks from the chalice that is full of rat poison, and he's quickly crying out in pain and spitting up blood until he dies right there in front of everyone. Father Pruitt holds him and rocks his body as the congregation goes silent. The sheriff grabs Ali and they try to leave, but there's a figure standing in the doorway. It's the angel. Dressed in the father's gowns, he looks very ominous as the angel climbs up the stairs and stands in front of them, then spreads his wings. What a fucking display. Pruitt is spouting off appropriate scriptures to tell them to behold the angel, be not afraid, they are in the presence of the Lord. And then Sturge wakes up. The congregation is stunned, and the apostles of Father Pruitt move quickly to circulate cups of poison to everyone, because they must kill their earthly body so their heavenly body can take over. It is but one moment of faith, he tells them. And then he waits. Sheriff again tries to leave, but this time Ali fights back and doesn't want to go. As Father Pruitt steps forward to support Ali, standing up to his father, Hassan pulls out a gun, which is odd since he told Sarah he doesn't even carry a weapon on this island. But it's probably a good idea given the circumstances. Wade tries to talk him down, but Hassan fires into the ceiling, demanding they give up his son. He fires a second shot as the parishioners wrestle him to the floor. Miss Keene praises Ali for standing up for God despite his own father's wishes. I thought y'all were supposed to honor your father. Thy father or the father? Make up your mind. And he is the second one to swallow his cup of poison. A bunch of other people follow suit, and soon they are coughing and gagging and dying all over the church. In the chaos, Millie picks up Hassan's gun off the floor and fires it. She didn't seem to hit anything, so she fires again, this time hitting Pruitt right in the forehead. I'm sure I'm not supposed to laugh. The angel screams and flies right toward her, snatching her up and taking her outside through the front doors. Miss Keene screams to shut the doors and keep them closed. People are starting to rake back up now, but not everyone inside the church drank the poison, so there's a number of regular people mixed in with the newly enlightened ones, and the situation turns tense very quickly. And even quicker than that, it becomes a bloodbath. The normals fight their way towards the exit, and we lose Ed to the crowd. Annie, Lisa, Sarah Aaron, Warren, Hassan, and Miss Keene make it to the little annex room in the back of the church. Keene proves just what a faithless coward she is by not drinking the poison herself, so she'd become one of them in the other room. She doesn't mind dying, though. She knows she'll be resurrected. I have a feeling she just doesn't want to be the one to have to make the decision for herself, so she could always say it wasn't my choice to do this if it doesn't turn out well. What so cowardly. Anyway, Aaron somehow now has the gun, so she shoots Bev, probably just so she'll shut up, and the rest of the group escape outside. Bev wakes up a little later, and all is quiet inside the chapel. The frenzy is over. Those who can die have, and the rest of them are dazed and confused as they go through their awakening. The father hasn't fully healed yet, so now Bev is in charge, and it seems like she had a bit of a plan of her own all this time. Throw open the doors so the new gospel can be spread, she says. And that's the end of the episode. So much has happened here, and I want to talk about so much, but there's only one more episode left, so I'm not sure, should I take a few minutes and talk about the craziness, or save it, because we're still in the climax of the story? Let's just cover the highlights. They are stuck on an island because ferry service has been suspended. The boats have all been hidden or maybe disabled by the only boat mechanic on the island. It is time for Easter Mass, and nobody is realizing the midnight Mass is due to the Father not being able to tolerate the sunlight. The angel has revealed itself to the congregation, but also attacked a woman for speaking out against what was happening. Not sure if that's going to sway anyone away from this turn of events, though. Episode 7, Revelation. Outside the church, Mildred wakes up, looking even younger than when she arrived here. She makes her way inside the church, and there sits Father Pruitt, coming to grips with the chaos that he created. The newly enlightened are rampaging through the town, breaking into people's homes and having at their blood-filled bodies. The ones who escaped from the church are back at Sarah's house, and they all realize just how stuck they actually are without phones or power or boats. While discussing how they could escape, they realize there can't be any escape for any of them. They've got to make sure none of the infected leave the island. They start to formulate a plan to get the kids onto the canoe so they can paddle out far enough to escape what's going on, but near enough so they can come back once everything is over. But then a Molotov crashes through the window, and Bev and Sturge are calling for Aaron and Sarah to come outside. Annie sends everyone through the window, even Warren, her only remaining family, and heads out to have a little showdown with Bev Keene. Finally, Bev gets told what a piece of shit she is right to her big dumb face, and I love it. Just when you think these two are going to have a little tussle, Annie stabs herself right in the neck and makes sure her blood flows freely to entice these bloodsuckers into spending more time with her and giving the group more time to get away. What a sacrifice! Annie is the Mother of the Year, and not the usual sarcastic Mother of the Year awards I give away to Florida women. The real Mother of the Year. She fucking earned it. Back inside the church, John and Mildred sit together discussing God, of course, and him still trying to understand the depths of his own faith and knowledge and how he came to do all this on the chance that he could save her life. He wanted them to have another chance, since he messed it all up so long ago by not choosing her and their daughter over being a priest. I knew that was Sarah's father. As soon as Mildred called him John the first time he showed up, I knew it. Anyway, they're crying over their lost opportunities, not getting to raise their daughter together, not building a life together, all because he wouldn't leave the church, and she didn't want to hurt George after he'd returned from the war. So this must have been an affair being had while someone was away. How dare you! John still wants a second chance, but realizes that is likely impossible. The sneak-away gang is still on the move, but is spotted by Uker, who thinks they smell amazing. Hassan shoots Uker in the shoulder, getting the attention of several other people in the area. An unaffected woman comes running out of a house, screaming that she needs help, right towards the group trying to sneak away. The angel suddenly lands right in front of her, and she is now on the menu. The gang gets moving again, but Hassan has to shoot Wade, who tries to follow. The adults go one way, Lisa and Warren go another, and hopefully they'll both get to where they're going in time. Bev and Sturge finish drinking Annie's blood, and he asks whether they should try to put out the fire before it gets out of hand. She says, nah, let it all burn, except the church, so people will know where their salvation really came from. Oh, this fucking bitch. Lisa and Warren wind up at Joe's house. She is definitely the leader of this duo. She grabs Joe's old rifle and some ammo and a gas can, and then takes Warren by the hand, assuring him they will be just fine. Now that's strength beyond measure. Way to be, Lisa. Oh, look, here is Ed. And there is Annie, and I can't believe that I forgot that they were going to resurrect like the rest of them. Oh, these two are a perfect pair, and I'm so glad that they found each other. Even if they're some kind of involuntary blood cravers now, they're together, and that's what counts. They have not fed on anyone yet, so their transition isn't complete, but they are hungry, and they don't know how long they can hold out. At the power poles, Hassan, Sarah, and Aaron sabotage the equipment, making sure it won't turn back on, and then they set some fires of their own to all of the boats in the marina. Warren and Lisa are still trying to get to where the canoes are. Given that he used to sneak out of his window and get to these canoes, and they literally escaped Bev at his house, I wouldn't have expected it to take them this long to get there, but whatever. Maybe this is why they never showed us how any of them got to the canoes in the first place. They hear Lisa's resurrected parents calling for her, so they duck into a house. The same house Bull disappeared into, and soon find his body, along with at least one more woman inside of there, and the angel himself, and a fresh victim he's currently feeding on. Probably that woman he just picked up out of the yard. Lisa swings her gun around and fires off 2 shots at this creature, but he just repositions himself and ignores them. He seems to enter a trance-like state while he's feeding. She tosses around some gas and sets the house ablaze. A few moments later, the angel flies out of the door, wings ablaze, and then Sturge yells Lisa's name and tells her her father is looking for her. The 2 teens get up and run away. Instead of giving chase, the resurrected turn their attention to gathering together before sunrise. Bev has readied the rec center for the yet-to-arrive guests and looks rather pleased to see the town burning to the ground all around them. She rings the church bell, which gets everyone's attention. She encounters Monsignor inside the chapel and explains to him what she's allowed to happen, so that the island will be cleansed and only the chosen will survive until they decide to spread the gospel to the mainland. Suddenly, Monsignor seems to have had a change of heart. I got it wrong, he tells Bev. This isn't the way. But then she turns on him, calling him a false leader and one of those priests the Bible warned us about. And she is not letting him into her sanctuary. Enjoy the sunrise, she says, and turns away. Sturge approaches and asks what's wrong. She tells him to keep the people orderly. They need an accurate head count so they know how many boats they'll need tomorrow. Sturge informs her the boats have been burned. Finally, the kids get to the canoe, and yes, they are all the way on the other side of the island, far away from the fire and anyone who might see them. So the time it takes to get there makes more sense. They cry about their lost families and the end of their lives on this island, then shove off in their canoe into the dark. At the church, Bev is greeting those who came there for shelter, cruelly deciding who gets to come in and who doesn't. One of Sturge's friends, who's not a churchgoer, is in the crowd, upset that he's killed his wife and son after something happened to him. He still doesn't understand. Well, if you had come to church more, then you could have saved your family, but it's too late for that now, and there's no room for you here. Sturge tries to comfort him, saying, "Why don't you watch the sunrise down by the shore? You like the water, right?" Father Pruitt tells that guy to come here, come into the God's house. It is for everyone, and runs inside the church. He stops short when he sees Sarah inside pouring gas all over the pews. He knows what she's doing and says, "Good." He continues on about how proud he is of her and sorry that him and her mother, could never tell her the truth and wishes things could have been different. Not the best time for a confession like that. She doesn't have time to process this, but no need to worry about that. Sturge comes in and shoots her in the stomach with his rifle like a second later. Pruitt hits him with a running tackle and they tumble out of the church and down the steps together. Mildred stops John's attack and they go into the church together to watch their daughter die. Pruitt tries to feed her some of his blood, but she spits it out, choosing to die right the first time. That's my girl. Mildred asks if they can take her to this little bridge down by the water where she used to like to play, and then tips over a candle on their way out of the church, and now that building is on fire as well. During all this commotion, Hassan has found the opportunity to pour gas all over the rec center, the last building standing on the island, and is nearly ready to torch it, but Bev grabs Sturge's rifle and shoots him in the leg. After a few minutes of her being a straight-up dickhead to him about how he's got dirty blood, and she always knew he was going to be trouble, and that basically he's a bad terrorist because he didn't wait until they were all inside to set this place on fire. Wow, Bev. I've mentioned the Islamophobia before, but to see the way bigotry blows up like a balloon once someone thinks they've got a little bit of power over somebody else is always incredible. Great representation of how thinly veiled dislike blossoms into outright contempt right in front of your eyes. Hassan lets Bev know he is not working alone on this, and a moment later, Aaron comes out of the rec center emptying a can of gas. Before Bev or anyone else can react, the angel bursts through a copse of trees and tackles her like he's done to 2 others so far, and then proceeds to feed on her. Seems to be his signature move. The lighter she held falls onto the walkway and Ali runs to pick it up. Bev tries to coax him into not setting the building on fire, but I don't think she can remember his name. And he's seen the destruction that's come out of that church that he wanted to go to, so his decision isn't that hard. He tosses the lit lighter into the building and it sparks up immediately. Bev pulls the trigger again, not sure if on purpose or not, but conveniently shoots Hassan one more time, and then Ali rushes to comfort his dad. Meanwhile, Erin is having all of her blood sucked out through her neck by an angel of the Lord. Again, this motherfucker is unbothered by anything that happens to him while he's feeding and does not notice all the slits and holes Erin is cutting into his wings while he sucks on her neck. He tries to pull away from her at one point, but she pulls him back, and he continues making a meal of her while she continues to puncture his wings as many times as possible. Smart thinking, girl. Oh, make sure that angel is as wrecked as possible. With nowhere to go because every building on the island has been burned, most of the population heads to shore so they can watch the sunrise one last time. I don't think they know this will destroy them. I think it's just the next natural event that they can look forward to. And it's a certainty that they can all lean on in this very confusing time. When Aaron has run out of blood, the angel stands up and only then notices how fucked his wings are. He screams at her and tries to fly away, but it's going to be a struggle. The kids in the canoe see him as he's trying to fly, but 30 miles is a long way to go with Swiss cheese wings and the sun nipping at your heels. I guess that's the cliffhanger of this ending because the rest of this episode is Aaron explaining to Riley what it's like to die. Not to be confused with the conversation they had before, she is literally describing to him what is happening to her right now. It sounds similar to Riley's, but different enough that this is her experience and understanding, using up those last moments on Earth to enjoy this vision with her best friend. Oh, God, it's so heartbreaking. Ed and Annie sing a hymn as the sun comes up, and we get flashes of everyone's last moments. Hassan and Ali are praying to Allah. Bev attempts to dig herself a hole, which is probably a good idea that could have worked if you started a while ago, you dumb bitch. John and Mildred sit on that bridge with their daughter, and he throws his collar away. And then the sun comes up, and they all burn away. It is kind of beautiful, the way so many of them were able to be together in the end. The only survivors are Lisa and Warren in the canoe. As ashes rain down from the massive fire that's engulfed the entire island, Lisa says she can't feel her legs. And that's the end of the show. Oh, goodness gracious. I really love this ending because it wasn't simple or easy or completely justified. This was a difficult decision to make, especially for those like Sarah and Aaron who sacrificed themselves to ensure humanity doesn't have to suffer more than it has to. And that is a selfless, thankless, never to be acknowledged decision that not everyone could make. Certainly not someone like Bev Keane. She basically escorted this plague through the front door, poured it a nice drink, and gave it pep talks when it felt bad about itself. All under the guise of faith and loyalty. At the very beginning of this, I said this is a story that asks, can you be too devoted to God? And I think the answer here is yes. If Bev were not so eager to bear witness to something divine, she could have shared her thoughts about the strange behavior going on with the father and perhaps done something a little earlier. But would it have made a difference against an angel? Perhaps not, but there's a difference between sacrificing yourself to a cause and fostering a murderous tendency in your priest in hopes the consequences will be beneficial to yourself. Big fucking difference, Bev Keane. Also, if you remember back to what Joe said about her urging people to take the settlements from the tanker spill, Bev has been taking from the residents of this island for as long as she could. Is she the ultimate villain of this island? I mean, I know there is a vampire here who has drained an entire island full of cats and kidnapped several human residents and murdered them as well, but I think his body count is probably less than Bev's, at least on Crockett Island, considering the number of people who have abandoned their homes here due to them taking a settlement and using it to vacate after giving a portion of it to the church, of course. And don't forget the dog she killed. I didn't say it before, but I'll say it now. Bev Keane killed Joe Colley's dog Nero, and she is a terrible person. You can let me know if you think there's a bigger villain here. Perhaps I'm letting my dislike of this character blind me to someone else. Anyway, I don't say this to minimize how bad the angel is. I know he is likely not an angel at all, but for someone who is as devout as Father Pruitt, how else could he possibly explain what happened to him? It makes absolute sense for him to relate his experience to something biblical, because what else could he say about it? Supernatural? Otherworldly? No, this is biblical, duh. What else is there possibly to be? At the end of this journey, these questions remain. Can one be too devoted to God? If someone believes that God is asking them to do immoral acts, like take lives and poison others with angel blood, is it okay? Should you shake off the religious yoke if you feel that what you're being asked is too much or not godly enough? And even then, if you wanted to, could you? Ultimately, I give this 4 stars because it was a good, solid storyline. The pacing was great. It kept me on the hook with the strange occurrences and miracles and catching glimpses of the angels sneaking around in Father Pruitt's clothes. I may be alone here, but I really enjoyed the deep exploratory moments. They were beautifully written, so maybe they are excerpts from the book. You can tell someone put a lot of passion into these monologues, and the minimal cuts through these scenes. I've mentioned before how much I appreciate these long-running scenes because it takes so much talent to be able to pull it off. I can't remember more than half of one of my sentences of my script at a time, so to watch someone speak with the words that someone else gave them for minutes at a time is impressive to me. Other than that weird transition between the monologues when Aaron and Riley are discussing what they think happens when they die, there's not really many scenes that I think are wasteful or overly indulgent. The slow reveal of the angel was nicely done. He did look a little like Father Pruitt while wearing the hat and coat. It's a little odd that in a town as small as this that nobody noticed all these weird things happening. But there were a number of abandoned homes on the island. People usually left once they got their settlement. And it's not like a lot of new people were moving into these homes, so it kind of makes sense in that regard. But it is weeks between when the cats wash up on the beach and he makes his appearance at the church. So what has he been feeding on? There were 3 people in that abandoned house. 2 of them were dead. 1, that guy Bull, we saw him get kidnapped, and I assume the alive woman was the one he just snatched up from the chaos of the fire. But who was the other woman? No one reported her missing yet. And if he was feeding on them, why are there not more victims on this island? If the angel could go elsewhere for food, why kill anybody on this island? And also, is that where he was when Father Pruitt couldn't find him to fill up the blood sacrament bottles anymore? They did not explain the vampire aspect very well, which I guess is cool. Like, the people here didn't really know what was going on, so nobody could really tell us. But I don't like being left wondering what the rules are for this angel. That's just me, though. I'm a vampirophile, or whatever you call that. I love vampire stories. And I also ask a lot of the stories that I invest my time watching. I want to know all the answers at the end, damn it. But other than those issues, I mostly enjoyed it. I do recommend this highly. It is beautiful to watch, and the actors do a wonderful job. I am curious how this series would be received by someone who is a believer. Like, do they find Riley's arguments offensive? Do they agree that the thing with wings is an angel, or is it a demon or something? Did they enjoy the monologues? I'm going to have to go digging through the reviews. I wait until I'm done doing my own review before I watch the reviews, so I'm not tainted, but I'm curious. I'm going to have to watch some. Recommend one if you know of a good one. But that is all that I have to say about this. Thank you for watching all the way through. This has been a super long one. I'm probably going to cut it down a little bit and put it on Facebook. So if that's the one you're watching, I got a big old long one on YouTube. And that is not something that dudes just tell you in the subway, okay? But for now, I have a lot of editing to do, so I'll keep it short and say enjoy the rest of your day, and y'all stay safe out there.